never considered myself the kind of person to explore the dark corners of the internet. Sure, I'd read the stories. Whispers of secret marketplaces, disturbing videos, and live-streamed horrors lurking beneath the polished surface of the web. But those were tales for bored thrill-seekers and conspiracy theorists, not people like me. It started with a single message. It was late, and I was finishing up some paperwork for my job. The monotony of the task making the quiet hum of my phone all the more startling. The sender was an old friend, Dylan, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. His message was cryptic, just a single line. "Help me. They're watching." I stared at the screen, the words sinking in slowly. Dylan was the kind of person who thrived on attention. In high school, he was the class clown, always pulling some prank or weaving ridiculous stories to make people laugh. But this didn't feel like a joke. His profile picture was gone, replaced by a blank gray silhouette, and the timestamp on the message was almost a week old. I typed back, "Dylan, what's going on? Are you okay?" No response. I tried calling, but the number had been disconnected. Something about the whole thing felt wrong. I couldn't explain why, but the feeling that he really needed help wouldn't go away. I spent the next few days trying to track him down. I called mutual friends, searched his social media accounts, even checked local news sites for any mention of him. It was like he'd disappeared. His Facebook page hadn't been updated in months, and none of our old friends had spoken to him recently. That's when I remembered his old obsession with hacking and the dark web. Dylan used to brag about the things he'd seen online: illegal auctions, secret chat rooms, things most people wouldn't dare to look for. I'd always dismissed it as more of his nonsense, but now I wondered if there was some truth to it. I decided to investigate. It wasn't hard to find instructions on how to access the dark web. A quick search brought up guides and forums explaining how to download Tor and stay anonymous. My hands shook as I followed the steps, installing the browser and configuring a VPN. The whole time, a voice in the back of my head whispered that this was a bad idea. But another voice, quieter but more insistent, told me I didn't have a choice. Dylan was in trouble, and I needed to help him. The first few sites I visited were underwhelming: forums, marketplaces, and pages advertising counterfeit goods. Nothing sinister, just shady. I almost convinced myself that Dylan's message had been some elaborate prank or a hacker's idea of a joke. But then I stumbled across a thread on one of the forums. Most of the replies were cryptic, filled with slang and code words I didn't understand. But one comment caught my eye. "Red Room, DM me for invites." A chill ran down my spine. I'd heard of Red Rooms before, the ultimate urban legend of the dark web. People claimed they didn't exist, that they were just a myth to scare curious wanderers. But what if they were real? What if Dylan... I hesitated, my cursor hovering over the user's profile. This was insane. Even if Dylan was in trouble, how could I possibly find him in a place like this? But something compelled me to click. I sent a message. "I'm looking for someone. Can you help?" The reply came almost instantly. $500 for access. I didn't respond right away. $500 was a lot of money, and I wasn't even sure this was real. But then I remembered Dylan's message. I couldn't walk away. Not yet. When the transaction finally went through, I received a link and a password, along with a warning. "No screenshots, no sharing. You've been warned." The link led to a plain black page with a single box for the password. I typed it in, my hands trembling, and hit enter. The screen flickered, then loaded a live video feed. The quality was grainy, but the image was clear enough. A small, windowless room bathed in red light. The camera was facing a metal chair bolted to the floor. Chains dangled from the armrests, and a dark stain spread across the concrete beneath it. My stomach churned. Dylan was sitting in the chair, his wrists bound by the chains. His head lolled forward, his hair matted with a combination of sweat and dirt. He was alive. I could see the rise and fall of his chest, but barely. Before I could process what I was seeing, the screen filled with text. "Welcome to tonight's show. Place your bids in the chat." My heart stopped. The chat on the side of the screen exploded with activity, messages flying by too fast to read. People were bidding money for something I didn't want to imagine. I wanted to look away, to close the laptop and pretend I'd never seen this, but I couldn't. Dylan's life depended on me. I typed frantically into the chat, Let him go. I'll pay whatever you want. No one responded. My message was swallowed by the flood of bids and comments, ignored by everyone. I tried again and again, but it was useless. Then the screen changed. A figure stepped into view, their face obscured by a black mask. They moved with slow, deliberate steps, holding an object I couldn't quite make out. They turned to the camera, tilting their head as if to study me through the lens, before turning back to Dylan. Dylan's eyes fluttered open, and for a moment I thought he saw me. His lips moved, forming a single word I couldn't hear but understood perfectly. Get out. With trembling hands, I scrambled to take a screenshot, my fingers clumsily hitting the keys in my panic. Just as I managed to press the right one, the screen flickered violently, a burst of static blaring from my laptop's speakers. Then without warning, the screen went completely black, plunging the room into silence and darkness. I stared at the now blank screen, my mind racing. What could I do? Call the police? What would I even tell them? That I'd paid $500 to access a mysterious live stream? I have no proof now. And then it hit me. The warning from the site. No screenshots, no sharing. You've been warned. My chest tightened and paranoia clawed its way into my thoughts. Could they tell? Had they known the moment I hit the key? Were they coming for me next? I didn't sleep that night. I spent hours scouring the dark web, searching for any trace of the Red Room or the people who ran it. I found nothing. Every lead was a dead end, every forum a maze of dead links and cryptic posts. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. My laptop froze and restarted itself without warning. Files disappeared, replaced by garbled text and strange symbols. My phone buzzed with messages from unknown numbers, all of them blank. And then the notes started. The first one was taped to my front door. You knew the rules. The second note appeared on my bathroom mirror, scrawled in red lipstick. We're watching you too. I tried to convince myself it was a prank, that someone had hacked into my accounts and decided to mess with me. But deep down, I knew the truth. They'd found me, just like they'd found Dylan. The next night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside my bedroom door. My heart started to pound, each beat echoing in my ears as I strained to listen. The faint creak of floorboards followed, deliberate and unhurried, as if someone was pacing just outside. My breath grew shallow, and I felt a cold sweat forming on my forehead. I stayed frozen, too terrified to move, listening as the soft, methodical steps grew closer before stopping altogether. The silence that followed was somehow worse, stretching out endlessly as I stared at the door, expecting it to burst open at any moment. Listening as they crept closer and closer. The doorknob rattled, then stopped. I held my breath, waiting for something to happen, but the house fell silent. When I finally worked up the courage to check, the hallway was empty, but taped to the wall was another note. You can't save him, but you'll be joining him. I ripped the note off the wall and crumpled it in my fist, trying to steady my shaking hands. My mind raced, but there was one thought that kept cutting through the panic. Dylan. I needed to find him, to do something before it was too late. The house felt unnervingly quiet. Every shadow seemed like a threat. I grabbed my phone, desperate to reach someone, but the screen was a blur of strange symbols and cryptic messages from unknown contacts. The numbers that had been texting me, the garbled ones from nowhere, kept multiplying. It was like they were coming from everywhere, crawling beneath the surface of my life. Then the call came. I wasn't expecting it, but the sudden vibration in my hand almost made me drop the phone. Hesitating, I answered. Hello? The voice on the other end was distorted, low, but something about it felt off. Too calm, too deliberate. It gave me a cold chill. You thought you could save him? The voice chuckled softly. You're just another player in the game. I barely choked out a response, panic flooding my chest. Who are you? Where is he? The line went dead. I felt like I was drowning. What had I gotten myself into? What had Dylan gotten into? I needed help, real help. Jason, an old college friend, was the only person I could turn to. He'd always had his ear to the ground when it came to tech. I'd ignored his warnings back then about the dark web, but now I was desperate. I called him. Jason, it's me, I said, breathless. I don't know who else to turn to. I've got a friend, Dylan. He's missing and he's in real danger. Some strange people from the dark web have him, and I need to find him fast. Jason didn't waste any time. Listen, I don't know much about this kind of thing, but if this is what I think it is, we might be able to track something down. Meet me at my place, and I'll show you what you're really dealing with. I arrived at Jason's house, my heart racing. He was sitting in front of his computer, eyes glued to the screen as if expecting this moment. His usual easygoing demeanor was gone, replaced with a sharp, focused edge I didn't recognize. He didn't waste any time. Jason quickly pulled up a page on the dark web. Part of it I could barely comprehend. "This is where they operate," he said, tapping the keys faster than I could follow. "Red rooms, hidden markets. They prey on people like your friend." "Dylan? He's in one of these rooms?" I asked, almost too afraid to ask. Jason didn't answer, just pulled up a link. Something even darker. More private. "You've got one shot at this. Once you go down this road, you can't turn back." I didn't hesitate. My fingers moved on their own as I clicked the link. The screen flickered and my heart pounded as the page loaded. It wasn't just another forum or chat room. It was something far worse. It was an invitation. Jason leaned over, his eyes gleaming with something darker now. "You know, everyone who ends up in the chair of our red room accepts the invitation in some way, whether they realize it or not," he said, his voice low and controlled. My stomach twisted. "What are you talking about?" Jason's smile was cold, predatory. "You accepted it the moment you clicked the link. You've already played your part, just like Dylan did. And now? Well, now you're a part of the game." My pulse raced as I backed away, but Jason was already moving. Before I could react, he grabbed a bat that was leaning against the wall. The hollow sound of it slicing through the air was the last thing I heard before everything went black. I woke up with a pounding headache, groggy and disoriented. My hands were tied behind my back, and my body ached as though I'd been dragged across concrete. My eyes snapped open, the dim light above flickering in my blurred vision. I tried to move, but the pain in my wrists stopped me. I tugged at the ropes, panic setting in as my surroundings came into focus. The room was cold, sterile, and concrete. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows. The air smelled musty, stale, like it hadn't been touched in years. I wasn't alone. Dylan was slumped in a chair across from me, his face pale and battered, his bloodshot eyes staring blankly ahead. His wrists were bound to the arms of the chair with thick metal chains. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. I called his name, but my voice sounded distant, muffled. Dylan's head turned slowly, and I could see the recognition in his eyes. But before I could say anything, a loud mechanical noise echoed through the room, the sound of chains rattling. The door in front of us creaked open, and the figure of a man in a mask stepped inside. He was holding a metal case, setting it down on the floor with a deliberate thud. "Welcome to the game," the figure said, his voice mechanical and detached. "You have both accepted the invitation. Your choices will determine whether you live or die." The masked figure raised his hand, and the room around us shifted. A screen lowered from the ceiling, displaying a timer counting down from 15 minutes. "Each of you has a key to escape," the figure continued, "but they are locked away. You must work together to open the box. But here's the catch. Each key comes at a price. If one of you does not make it, the other will have a chance, but that's the only chance you'll get." The door slammed shut behind him, leaving me and Dylan alone in the room. "What the hell is going on?" I gasped, trying to process what had just happened. Dylan's eyes were wide with terror. They put me through this already," he muttered, barely coherent. "They want you to break, to choose." I felt a cold dread wash over me. I thought back to Jason's words. Everyone who ends up in the chair accepts the invitation in some way. The clock kept ticking. I looked around frantically, my eyes landing on two metal boxes positioned across from each other at the far end of the room. Each box seemed to have its own unique mechanism, one larger than the other, with wires running underneath them. Something was off. I turned back to Dylan. "We have to find a way out." But Dylan didn't seem to be listening. His eyes were glued to the timer, his hands trembling as he stared at the boxes. "Look, you don't get it," he said, his voice shaking. "We're not supposed to get out. We're supposed to choose." Before I could respond, the masked figure's voice crackled through the intercom, sending a chill down my spine. "Choose quickly. Your time is running out." I rushed to one of the boxes, hoping to find something, anything that could help, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely focus. "Hand me that box and sit back down," I got you into this. I need to be the reason you get out, Dylan said. I picked up the box, wires still hanging from it, and handed it to Dylan. Now go sit down, he said, his voice trembling. Just as I was facing my own chair, about to sit down, I heard a click and a flash of light pulsed. Then the room's lights went out. His choice has been noted and recorded, crackled over the intercom.